Wow, this guy, not only have we had a spirit descending on him in the form or the imagery of a dove, we've now got this voice from heaven which is flagging this dude up as somebody who is a one of the kind. There is no other Yeshua, there is no other Jesus.
Verse 10, and straightway coming up out of the water, he, now I'm assuming this is Jesus, he saw the heavens opened and the Spirit like a dove descending upon him. The imagery here is quite distinctive. Do you suppose that others would have seen and heard what's about to unfold? Is this an account that later was given to Mark, or is it a rhetorical flourish that he's using, that this is a significant moment and there is the visual? I doubt others would have seen this, or would they?
I've asked that question. Was it just a private thing or not? If you were to look at the Gospel of John, chapter 1, 32, this is talking of John the Baptizer, and verse 32 says, and John bore witness, saying, I saw the Spirit descending from heaven, etc. I personally don't think that this was a public spectacle. I think that this is what John the Baptizer saw. You raised a point when you read that opening verse, and straightway coming out of the water, he saw the heavens opened. And you said you presume Jesus. No, it isn't. That's not who's the referent here. Right. Referent is John the Baptizer. Okay. So John the Baptizer sees the heavens open, and he sees the Spirit like a dove. He doesn't say it is a dove. He says it's like a dove descending. So I personally am inclined to think that this was a private audience in terms of what John the Baptizer could see. He could see the heavens. He could see the Spirit descending, and the only way he could describe the descent of the Spirit was something like a dove.
Straightway coming up out of the water. Now, we have talked quite exhaustively regards to Genesis, the role of water.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And it's been mentioned again. Okay, I know baptism is to go into the water, but it's something here I just sense is being referred to. Is there anything in that?
This verse, I think, really starts to kick us into the swing of the story of Mark. He uses this little adverb, straightway, that's used about 41 times in this short gospel of his, which is immediately, straightaway. The Greek word is euthos. It means the very next moment, the next instant, which is why I talk about this like a highlight reel. Bang, next highlight, next highlight, next highlight. But Mark uses it in a really interesting way because he uses it to fuse together stories in a really dramatic type of fashion. Some translators might use just as, so they would say, just as Jesus was coming out of the water. Bang, there we are, look, just as this was happening, this happened. And so it keeps you constantly looking as to what's coming out next. John the Baptizer, as he's baptized Jesus, and Jesus is just as Jesus is coming out of the water, the account says that John sees the heavens, which is the Greek word uranos, which can mean heavens, as in the sort of celestial heavens, or the sky, depending on the context. But this is what interests me about this first bit. He saw the heavens opened. Now that word is a really interesting little word. It's the Greek word schizo, which means he saw them splitting apart.
That's where we get schizophrenic from.
That's right. That's the etymology of our word.
Interesting.
Yeah. The splitting apart, the dividing by rending back, breaking, dividing, opening. And that intrigues me. I started to dive down a little hole when I was looking at this. So schizo is obviously used for the heavens as they're split apart. It was also used in the Gospel of John about the clothing that is split apart of Jesus at his execution. Let us not tear it, but let us cast lots for it. That tear is the same word, that's schizo. It's also used for the dividing of the curtain between God and humanity at the Holy of Holies at his death, when the curtain was schizo, split apart. It's also used when the tombs were split apart and the dead came out. I think it's in the account of Matthew. So the same word is used in all three of the synoptics for the account of Jesus' death. All ties in with the symbology that's being used. Just as the symbolic act of water baptism, the mikvah, started a new ministry, i.e. he's now being identified not as Jesus of Nazareth, but stepping in and being identified with something new. The symbolism that's woven through the use of this language also points us to something else. There's a splitting apart, there's a rending, and you track that all the way through. We've got that coupled with the imagery of the dove.
There's an interesting parallel here because you're talking of a word that's quite dramatic.
Yeah, massively. Yeah.
Open.
Yeah.
And then the dove, peaceful.
John the Baptizer doesn't say it is a dove, he says it's like a dove. So where we have imagery of a dove landing on Jesus' head as he comes out the water, well, that's not what John's saying he saw. He's saying he saw the Spirit, and the only way he can express that is it is something like a dove. But it's not a dove.
Do you think it's angelic?
It's spirit. How do you describe spirit? As I was reflecting on this imagery, I began to think back to stuff that we've really worked through, right back to our little project that we did on Genesis. This aspect of the Godhead, the Spirit, hovered over the water of Jesus' baptism. Well, you go right back to the very beginning of Genesis, and the Spirit hovers over the water of creation. Noah has the dove, and the dove goes out, but the dove doesn't find anywhere to rest her feet, so she comes back. She then waits 7 days, and he sends her out again, but this time she comes back with an olive leaf, which is a symbol of promise. And then he releases her again 7 days later, but this time she doesn't return. So you've got 14 days between her first being released and her not coming back. Why 14? Why not 15? Why not 20? 14 is kingship. And that's because the name of King David adds up to 14. But as I was looking at this from the Jewish perspective, the Hebrew number 14 is made up of two groups of numbers. It's made up of 10, which is Yod, and it's made up of 4, which is Dalet. And so the Jewish understanding is that the body of Moshiach, the body of Messiah, is a body composed of righteous Israel, but it's a unity made up of parts. i.e. the body is Israel, but the head is Moshiach, the head is Messiah. When you start to look at the numbers in all of this, you have 10, which is a unity made up of parts. You have 4, which is completion, wholeness, or fullness. And so when you compound those together, you've got 14 as a compound number. So it means a whole or complete unity expressed in the body of Messiah, who is the head of righteous Israel. And so the dove was released from Noah, never to return. Now, John sees something like a dove returning. The new symbol of promise was here. The new symbol of hope was here. The dove was waiting, if you like, for an opportune moment to return and rest upon Jesus, who is the new ark, the new means of rescue for humanity. Not just for a small family group of nations such as Israel, but irrespective of colour, background, creed, etc. You've got this wonderful weave coming together that covers Genesis, creation, Noah, recreation, the dove going out, coming back to the ark, which was the place of rescue, and then going out never to return. And so from a narrative perspective, the dove was still wandering the earth. But all of a sudden, the dove now returns to the new ark, the new rescue, the new place of rescue for humanity, which is in the person of Jesus.
I'm kind of with you because time fascinates me. I think we've talked about this before. Because time, if you think about it, does it really exist? When is it noon in outer space? Now, philosophically, temporality talks about the idea of a linear progression. That's Western philosophy. That's half our problem, because Eastern philosophy talks it as circular. And in fact, modern concepts to quite a few physicists now, that time is not fundamentally real, and they're all blended. The past, present, and future outside of the physical is at the same time. So we've talked about, it may have been our other channel, that we have our bodies, we have our soul, we also have a mind. The mind and the soul are outside of the physical, they are outside of time. Even if our body dies, potentially the mind, whatever, in some quarters, not everybody's going to accept this, exists beyond that. So there is no time. So when we look at the progression of time through history, or from mytho-history into the history of the Old Testament down to the New Testament, I think we often make a mistake thinking that it's running in a length, quite a long line, and you can't go back. Well, God could, because there's no time in the spiritual realm. It's almost instant between Noah and Jesus.
Yeah.
So I think you're onto something. But what's interesting now, this is what the Hebrews were talking 2,000, 3,000 years ago.
We're not as smart as we think we are, right? We're not as advanced as we think we are. We just explain it in a language today and in a format today that makes sense to us. I strongly suspect that what we term dimensionality in science, quantum physics and all of that sort of stuff, and dimensions, is what the ancients would have called spirituality. And I do believe that there's a significant crossover into that. We're splitting hairs in terms of the word that we're using.
Verse 11, because it's not just the image of something like a dove. There came a voice from heaven, saying, "Thou art my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Much to talk about here. But voice, and I'm assuming this is John the Baptist who's hearing the voice.
We don't know. It doesn't tell us if it was visible and audible to everybody, but as I say, based on that John account, I would suggest that this is something that John told other people, because he testified to what he saw and what he heard. The impact of what we are seeing here in these few verses is quite staggering. Beloved is a Greek word, agapetos. There's a lot of force in that Greek word, which we don't get in the English. It's called the divine love because it's the love of choice. This particular word, agapetos, is often only used pertaining to the one who is the only one of his class, but at the same time is particularly loved and cherished. This little word is flagging Jesus up as being something which is absolutely previously unseen and unique. And we miss that. That would then focus the attention. Wow, this guy, not only have we been spirit descending on him in the form or the imagery of a dove, we've now got this voice from heaven which is flagging this dude up as somebody who is a one of the kind. There is no other Yeshua. There is no other Jesus. There may be some people that look like him, there may be some people that sound like him, there may be some people that even act like him. There is only one Son. He is unique, completely and utterly unique. And within what Mark has done here, within the framing that he's just done here, we've now got Jesus the man, we have got the Spirit of God, we have then got the voice of God, which is the great Spirit that we would call the Father. So we now, in frame, we have Father, Son, Spirit, all in view, all presented simultaneously, which echoes all the way back to Deuteronomy Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one. Echad, a unity in diversity.
Is it worth also stating then that you're referring to the Trinity, of course, And
course.
this was written way before the Trinity was accepted.
Way before it was codified, yes.
Codified, yeah, sure.
I think it was accepted, but it was never codified.
Right. Well, it's not accepted by some today.
It's not, you're right.
Is there anything to say about in whom I am well pleased? Because I don't sense we're getting the full impact here in English.
Or in you I take great delight. The Great Spirit, that we in Christianese would call God the Father, is marking out Jesus as this chosen one. He is the one in whom the Great Spirit has uniquely appointed in order to convey the message that John the Baptizer has prepared the way for. As Mark is recording this, what he's doing again is he's drawing on the Old Testament, the Tanakh. He's drawing stuff up by using the language that he uses, in whom I am well pleased. You're my son, I've begotten you. You know, he draws that from Psalm 2 verse 7, which says, I will tell of the decree the Lord said to me, you are my son, today I have begotten you. He draws from Isaiah 41 verse 8, but you, Israel, my servant Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend. Or Isaiah 42 verse 1, behold my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen, in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him, and he'll bring forth justice to the nations, not just to the Jewish nation, but the nations. And there's even the possibility that you could even push it back further than that if you wanted to, which would be right back to Abraham when he's offering Isaac on the altar. God intervenes in Genesis 22 verse 16, and God says, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. So the whole scene that Mark is setting here is absolutely rich in expectation. It is rich in prophetic expectation, potentiality. The last of the Old Testament prophets, John the Baptizer, is noting all of this, and he is then testifying to it. The symbolic links that we have to creation, to Noah, to recreation, to kingship, to unity in diversity. This is an incredible, intricate piece of writing that is pregnant with potential waiting to be released and birthed.
So what we are getting here is a definitive statement about Jesus. He's from a rough town, and he's what most people would consider a nobody. And suddenly John is getting evidence that there's more to this guy. He's definitely something, which makes me wonder why he began to doubt him later.
Look where he is. He's human, right?
True.
He's human.
Okay.
This is one of the beauties as well, I think, about the scripture, is that it doesn't try to hide the weaknesses of the people that we could elevate. John sat there in a prison cell later on. He's waiting to have his head chopped off. And he's beginning to wonder, man, have I got this wrong? Did I back the wrong horse here?
Yeah.
Just think about that just from a human psychological perspective. That resonates as true, because most humans, when they are down on their uppers, ponder, they reflect, they ask questions. So to me, what that does is it just says, yeah, this John the Baptizer was a real bloke. He had real anxieties, tensions, worries, fears. He's just like you and me. When things are going well, he's up there. When things suddenly the wheel falls off, he starts to doubt his convictions.
I'm glad you used the word, I don't know if you used the word, it came to my mind, the psychological aspect.
Yeah, that's right, I did.
That's often overlooked. You don't get that, do you? I very rarely hear people talking about the psychological aspect of Scripture. But it's definitely here.
It is. That's why Jordan Peterson has been so interesting to listen to with his pulling apart of Genesis and Exodus, because he delves into the psychology of these things, which he finds fascinatingly true from a psychological perspective. Whether they're materially true, historically true, that's not his issue. From a psychological perspective, he goes, yeah, that resonates with me. And this resonates with me as what I see in real people, even today.
Well, What an interesting conversation, as always.
Absolute pleasure.
We managed to get 3 verses there. We're getting good at this, Steve.
Mate, we're on a roll. We're
Yeah.
on a roll. It's fascinating.
I'm looking forward especially to the next one, because there's a little thing here coming up that intrigues me immensely.
Very good.
But the devil's in the detail.
Devil's always
I'll
in the
speak to you
detail.
later.
Later, mate. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.